Hello guys and welcome to Splitsecond. My name is Sequeira and today I'll be joined by Luís Brandão, Lopes and Baal Roi for another fun CADH game. Before I begin introducing this week's commanders, we at Splitsecond want to thank everyone out there on social media for your support and suggestions. We intend to slowly start testing and implementing some of these in order to achieve the best possible platform and content quality that we can. This week we have me piloting Kykar stack / anti-combo, Luís Brandão with Tymna Tana Bloodpod, Lopes with a tradition of the Locust God, and Baal with a more interactive version of Jhoira Weatherlight Captain. It's a lot of red this week. For starting hands we have David with 2 basic lands, which makes sense considering he had Blood Moon and Back to Basics in his deck, and a pretty nice early game interaction in the shape of Narset, Parter of Veils, and Winds of Change. With both resolving, this would mean everyone else would be forced to exchange their full hand for a single card. On the downside, it doesn't have double blue or any interaction for everyone else's shenanigans except for Rift, but it has card draw from Opt and in a way Brainstorm, which could easily help with that. Next up, Baal was forced to mulligan to 6 cards, and his hand is somewhat fragile. He only has 1 land, but he does have mana for Flusterstorm. If he manages to hit his second mana source, he should be able to gain some footing in the game. Whip Flare is also a pretty good way to interact with the table, either killing off the Locust Gods and Kykar's tokens, or even both commanders and mana sources from Tymna and Tana. Baal chooses to send Hercule's Recall to the bottom of his library. I also mulliganed once and decided to risk keeping this hand. It has a lot of preemptive interaction that is relevant for everyone involved. It stops storming turns from both Jhoira and the Locust God, thanks to Dampening Sphere, and it cuts off Blood Pods enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield effects, thanks to Torpor Orb and Hushbringer. Cyclonic Rift will also help me in any stage of the game. Finally, Luís Brandão has a very solid hand with early ramp thanks to Sol Ring, which could mean a turn 2 Tana, Caustic Caterpillar for interaction, Entomb as a tool later in the game, and a Birthing Pod for him to try and combo out early in the game. His land coverage should be able to get him any color combinations he needs. Even if he gets disrupted, he should still be able to fall back and rely on Tymna's card draw for recovery. Let's see how this one plays out. David plays his island and passes the turn. Baal does very much the same, playing his island and passing to me. I choose to play my command tower and pass. Luís plays and cracks his Verdant Catacombs for a Savannah, losing 1 life. He then attempts to cast his Sol Ring. David responds with an Opt, but Sol Ring ends up resolving. David plays the Mountain from his initial hand and passes. Baal fails to draw the land he needed, so he plays Mox Opal to play around Blind Obedience and Root Maze. He passes the turn. I play Ancient Tomb. I tap it, lose 2 life, and cast an Izzet Signet. Unsure what I'm up against, I try to cover 2 opponents at once by casting Damping Sphere, even though it hurts my Ancient Tomb. After this, I pass the turn. Luís Brandão plays his Blood Crypt untapped, losing 2 life. He now has all 4 of his colors. He plays Tana, and on the end of Luís's turn, David casts Brainstorm to try and look for a way to advance his Narset Winds of Change combination. Unfortunately, David draws a Mountain instead, so he decides to cast his Spellseeker. With it, he picks up a Vandal Blast since it's his best option to get rid of my Damping Sphere. He passes, and Baal slam dunks his top card, which is a Wooded Foothills. He cracks it, picking up a Volcanic Island. He taps it and casts Dockside Extortionist, giving him 3 treasures and getting his Mox Opal Metalcraft online in the process. He then uses 3 mana, due to Damping Sphere's ability, to cast Izzet Signet. With his board state established, he passes. On my turn, I miss a land drop. Then, I cast Dovin, Hand of Control. I stop Tana from dealing damage and giving Brandão Saplings or drawing cards from Tymna. Pretty smug, I pass my turn. During his turn, Brandão plays a forest and casts a Bloom Tender, threatening us with tons of mana. With his floating mana, he also casts a Scavenging Ooze. This way, he can thread my Dovin and also draw cards from Tymna if he chooses to cast her during his next turn. After that, he passes. During David's turn, he casts Gitaxian Probe using Phyrexian mana, but still has to pay 1 for Dovin's tax. He chooses to analyze how much more trouble I intend to bring to the board. He draws a card from the probe and finds a second basic island. He taps 3 lands and casts a Goblin Bombardment, which is pretty good with his commander. After that, he decides to play safely and passes the turn without attacking. On Baal's turn, he once again manages to top deck a land. He plays an Adventurous Fair and then makes the game a bit less fun for me and Brandão thanks to a Cursed Totem. After that, he chooses not to attack and also passes his turn. I manage to draw a Snow Cover Plains and choose to protect my Dovin by losing 2 life to Ancient Tomb and casting Kykar. Then, to make it easier for me to block Luís's attack or to prevent him from getting Saplings on David, I -1 the Dovin on Tana again. After that, I pass the turn. Luís plays an exotic Orc card. He then loses 2 life to cast Birthing Pod, getting everyone in the table a little nervous. Still, he should have a hard time getting a combo because of the Cursed Totem, which stops Kiki-Jiki lines. Luís loses an additional 2 life to use the pod, sacrificing Scavenging Ooze and getting a Manglehorn, triggering a Destroy Target Artifact ability, which he aims at the Cursed Totem. In response, David uses his Goblin Bombardment, sacrificing Spellseeker and dealing with Bloom Tender. The stack resolves and Luís passes the turn. Now that it's David's turn, he simply draws and passes because he didn't get the much needed mana for the overloaded Vandal Blast. Baal gains 1 life during his upkeep thanks to Inventor's Fair. He draws a Cavern of Souls, continuing his land draw spree, and plays it naming Human, which is one of Jhoira's types. Baal also has an Urza in his deck. He casts Jhoira using the Cavern of Souls for protection from David's shenanigans. After that, he passes the turn. During my turn, I choose to play Torpor Orb so I can get a Spirit from Kykar and the possibility to further interact. I -1 Dovin once more, choosing Tana as my target. After that, I pass the turn. On his turn, Luís tries to cast the Caterpillar he had since turn 1, which is aimed at my Torpor Orb. Baal doesn't want him to benefit too much from the Birthing Pod, so he decides to cast Mental Misstep on the Caterpillar, losing 2 life for the Phyrexian mana and tapping an island for the Dovin tax. Annoyed, Luís sacrifices his Tana for the Birthing Pod, looking to bring a new threat to the table. He finds a Tendershoot Dryad. Then he attacks David with his Mangalorn for 2 damage. David has no blockers and takes it. On his second main phase, Luís decides he doesn't care to lose his Birthing Pod and casts a Null Rod to put me and Baal behind. I respond to the Null Rod and I cast Reality Shift on the Tendershoot Dryad, since it could easily create an overwhelming board state. Kykar triggers, giving me a new Spirit token. Tendershoot Dryad is exiled and Luís manifests the top card of his deck. Then his turn ends. During his turn, David finds a Forgotten Cave. After that, he passes the turn. Baal gains another life from his Inventor's Fair. He casts a Chrome Mox, tapping 1 land for the Dovin tax and drawing 1 card with Jhoira. The Mox should enter the battlefield tapped because of Mangalorn, but Baal didn't imprint any card into it due to Null Rod, and it doesn't affect the board state in any way. After casting the Mox, Baal attacks David with Dockside Extortionist and passes the turn. On my turn, I draw a snow-covered island and decide to cast Rest in Peace. This gives me another Spirit token and also gets me closer to other interesting plays. I pass my turn. Luís plays Lanora Wastes and casts Tymna in order to try and recover from the focus he's been taking. He attacks David for 4 damage with his Mangalorn and Manifest token. Luís loses 1 life to draw a card from Tymna. He passes. David draws a card. It's not a land, so he can't cast Vandal Blast Overloaded because of Dovin tax. During Baal's turn, he wins another life with Inventor's Fair. Then, he decides to attack Brandão with Jhoira and David with his Dockside Extortionist. Figuring that letting me have Spirit tokens at will and letting Brandão draw cards as he needs is dangerous, Baal decides to take out our creature resources with Whip Flare, dealing 2 damage to each non-artifact creature. Then, he passes the turn. Not too thrilled, I start my turn by losing 2 life to Ancient Tomb and getting more enter the battlefield hate with Hushbringer. I attack David with my Kykar, leaving my Dovin seemingly with very little protection. After that, I pass. Brandão starts his turn by playing a Bloodstained Mire, cracking it for a basic swamp, just in case, and then he brings Tana back to the battlefield by casting her. Satisfied, he passes. During his turn, David decides it's time to stop getting pressured by creatures and tries to cast Blasphemous Act. Unfortunately, he forgot the Dovin tax, so this play isn't legal, forcing him to go back. He decides to pass the turn once again. On his upkeep, Baal gains 1 life from Inventor's Fair. Then, he taps 3 mana to cast his Mind Stone and draw a card from Jhoira. He attacks David for pressure and plays a Polluted Delta before passing the turn. On my turn, I attack David with my Hushbringer. Because we saw David's Blasphemous Act, I decide not to use Dovin on Tana, just to see how the game develops. Not wanting to lose resources over nothing, Luís decides to pass his turn without attacking. During his turn, David manages to draw a mountain. Now he can cast both Blasphemous Act and a Vandal Blast. He chooses the latter. Not wanting to lose his board, Baal casts a Flusterstorm targeting Vandal Blast. I decide I want to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I cast Narset's Reversal targeting the overloaded Vandal Blast. This way, the next turn will force David into deciding between the Blasphemous Act or the Vandal Blast once again. To try and reduce my resources, Baal attacks Dovin with Jhoira. I block, losing a Spirit and increasing the Blasphemous Act cost passively. Before Baal's end of turn, I cast Cyclonic Rift on Tana to keep control over the board's creatures and the Blasphemous Act tax, while also making casting Tana even less optimal. On my turn, I attack David for 2 damage, gaining 1 from the Hushbringer. Then, during my second main phase, I sacrifice my Spirit, then I cast a Chandra Torch of Defiance to get another one and really set my foot on the board. I use her +1 where she exiles the top card of the library and unfortunately lose a Will Kenrith. I use Dovin's ability on Jhoira, making the Blasphemous Act even less optimal, and pass the turn. During his turn, Luís decides to take out my value from Kykar, casting a Kenrith's transformation and drawing a card. Then, he taps 2 mana to cast Elves of Deep Shadow, which he doesn't care to lose, and a tapped Overgrown Tomb. He passes afterwards. Fed up with my board state, David decides to cast a single target Vandal Blast on my Damping Sphere, destroying it. After that, he's able to pursue his opening hand plan by casting Narset Parter of Veils, followed by Winds of Change. With Winds of Change on the stack, Baal chooses to cast a Weir of Invention to seek out a Soul Ring. He only has one card in hand. I have 2 cards in my hand, Luís has 4 cards in his hand, and David has another 4 cards in his hand. Baal casts his Cyclonic Rift with the intention of getting rid of my Chandra and reducing everyone's hand size to 1 so as to make David the main enemy. I try to convince him to target Narset instead, but fail. Chandra goes to my hand. Before Winds of Change resolves, Luís casts Entomb to get rid of a forest. Then, Winds of Change resolves. Baal draws no cards because he had none in his hand. Me and Luís draw 1 and David draws 4. After that, he uses Narset's -2 and doesn't actually find any non-land, non-creature card. He passes the turn. Baal draws a card and passes the turn since his Jhoira doesn't deal damage until my next turn. I play a Sacred Foundry tapped. Figuring we don't have much time left, I decide to attack David with everything I have. After that, cast Psychic Surgery, which is used mostly to stop shenanigans but came way too late in the game. Luís attacks David for 1. Then he plays a Kataki, War's Wage, and an Eternal Witness, which doesn't trigger because of Hushbringer. He passes the turn. During his turn, David casts the Locust God and uses Narset's -2. He fails to find an illegal target for the card, which says a lot about David's shuffling skills. Putting all cards on the bottom of his library, he passes the turn. At the end of it, Baal casts Paradoxical Outcome, targeting his Soul Ring to draw a card. During his turn, Baal attacks me for 3 commander damage and passes. On my turn, I lose 2 life to pay for Kataki's tax, and then I attack David with my Hushbringer and my 3/3 Elk, Kykar. Because he only has 13 life left, David blocks my 3/3 Elk, which returns Kykar to the command zone. Then, I stop the Locust God from dealing damage and killing Luís's creatures until my next turn thanks to Dovin's -1. Finally, I play a Winter Orb, so that David can just activate the Locust God at will and pass. During his turn, Luís takes out the Narset with his attack, so that himself and Baal can draw cards and maybe help us out with this situation. He passes. On his turn, David draws a card and creates a 1/1 token from the Locust God. He casts Mind Stone and passes. Now that it's Baal's turn, he casts his Soul Ring to draw an additional card from Jhoira's ability. Then, he casts a Grim Monolith, drawing a second card with Jhoira. After that comes an Arcane Signet. At this point, we're all wondering if he could just win outright, but if he can't, then my Winter Orb and Kataki would make it hard for him to win the turn after that. Baal keeps it rolling with the Talisman of Creativity, tapping as many of his mana artifacts as possible for the process. He ends his casting spree with a Mystic Remora. Afterwards, Baal attacks me with Jhoira again for 3 damage. He puts down a Mana Confluence and passes his turn. During my turn, I tap 2 lands for Kataki's ability and sacrifice Torpor Orb, play a Flooded Strand and Cry Inside. During his turn, Luís loses 1 life to produce 1 black mana with Elves of Deep Shadow and casts Tymna the Weaver. Then he attacks me with Eternal Witness and Baal with Kataki. We both lose 2 life, then he loses 2 life to draw 2 cards. After that, he goes to his hand step, where David cracks the Mind Stone to draw a card and produce a new insect token. During his turn, David draws a card, produces a new insect token, and watches the world burn. At the beginning of his upkeep, Baal gains 1 life from Inventor's Fair and tries to fish for cards by paying the Mystic Remorse. He taps his artifacts to pay for the Kataki tax. Then, Baal casts Sorcerer's Spyglass and draws a card from Jhoira. David responds by killing Jhoira with his Goblin Bombardment and sacrificing 3 insect tokens, knowing that Baal can still win the game if he keeps going with the card drawing. Baal looks into David's hand and chooses Goblin Bombardment for the Sorcerer's Spyglass. He then plays an island and goes to his end step. I crack the Flooded Strand, losing 1 life, and put a Tundra into play. During my turn, I pay for the Kataki tax once again and I am forced to pass. On Luís's turn, he attacks me with Tymna, Baal with Kataki, and David with Elves of Deep Shadow and an Eternal Witness. David kills the elves to cut off Luís's non-land mana resources and takes 2 damage. Afterwards, he pays 3 life and draws 3 cards. He plays a forest and passes the turn. David draws a card and puts an insect into play. Then he plays an island and passes the turn. During his upkeep, Baal pays for the Remora once again and gains 1 life from the Inventor's Fair. He sacrifices the Grim Monolith for the Kataki tax and pays for the rest with his artifacts. Then he plays an Academy Ruins and is forced to pass the turn. During my turn, I decide to swap to my Ancient Tomb to pay for the Kataki tax, losing 2 life in the process. We're all stuck in this board state, not actually being able to advance it because of Winter Orb and Kataki, but at the same time kept relatively safe while trying to find an advantage to deal with everything that's happening. On his turn, Luís plays a scrub land. He attacks me with Tymna and Eternal Witness while attacking Baal with Kataki. Luís draws 2 cards, then he casts Cindervines, letting Baal draw a card from Mystic Remora in the process. Although Cindervine puts David in danger of losing if he goes deep, he lets it resolve. On David's turn, he untaps a mountain and draws a card, putting an insect token into play. Then, he taps a mountain and island to play Impact Tremors, letting Baal draw 1 card from Mystic Remora and losing 1 life to Cindervines. Baal repeats his previous turns, paying for Mystic Remora, Kataki, and gaining 1 life from the Eventus Sphere before passing. On my turn, I sacrifice Winter Orb for Kataki and pay the tax for Izzet Signet. Then, I try to cast Linvala, Keeper of Silence. The idea is still to stop David from activating the god. He lets it resolve. During my end step, Luís tries to cast Swords to Plowshares, targeting the Locust God and triggering Mystic Remora. David casts a Swan Song in response, targeting the Swords to Plowshares, which also triggers Mystic Remora and Cindervines. The Swan Song resolves, Swords gets countered. Without the Winter Orb in play, Luís is able to untap all his lands and plays a Bayou. He attacks Baal with Tymna, gaining 1 life after tallying her card drawing ability. On his second main phase, he casts Isan the Bard, which I disapprove of with all my being. Finally, he casts a Green Sun Zenith for 3 mana, Baal draws a card, and he finds a Collector Roof. My disapproval diminishes and Baal's rises. Psychic Surgery triggers for the first time, and I decide to exile a Gaia's Cradle from the top of his deck. During his turn, David gains an insect token and we lose 1 life to Impact Tremors. Then, Luís basic land cycles an Ash Barrens, triggering Psychic Surgery for the second time. Looking at the top of his deck, I laugh because I see a Domri Anarch of Bolas and a Rhythm of the Wild, both of which sort of do the same thing. I choose to exile the Planeswalker. At the end of David's turn, Baal targets himself with Urkil's Recall, sending all of his inactive artifacts to his hand. During his turn, Baal pays 4 mana for the Mystic Remora and then casts an uncounterable Jhoira Weatherlight Captain, losing 1 life to Mana Confluence. He casts an Everflowing Chalice, taking 1 damage from Cindervines as well, draws a card, and then goes to his cleanup step. He discards Torpor Orb, Ponder, back to basics, and Phyrexian Revoker. On my turn, I untap and cast Kykar, losing 2 life to the Ancient Tomb. Then I pass. On Luís's turn, he attacks Baal with the Swan token. He loses 1 life to draw a card with Tymna and then casts the Rhythm of the Wild. He lets Baal draw a card to Mystic Remora. He then plays a forest and casts Demonic Tutor, feeding the fish once again. Psychic Surgery triggers and reveals an Assassin's Trophy and a Buried Alive. I choose to let both on the top of Luís's deck because Assassin's Trophy would help with the Locust God and Buried Alive was useless with Rest in Peace in play. After that, Luís casts an uncounterable Bane of Progress with Riot, destroying all of our artifacts and enchantments and maybe dealing with David and giving it 9+1/+1 counters in the process. On his turn, David draws a card putting an insect token into play. He casts Altar of Dementia, followed by Ponder, and puts an insect token into play. He then uses Izzet Charm to remove the Collector Roof and get his Altar of Dementia online. Finally, he casts Sage of the Falls, which resolves. Whenever the Sage or another non-human creature enters the battlefield, David can draw a card and discard a card. Each insect token that the Locust God produces with the draw is non-human and it draws the next card, and so on. Because David has a Nulla-Mog, the Infinite Gyre, in his deck, David can draw his entire deck multiple times over and over and mill us all with Altar of Dementia. Alternatively, he could have just attacked us with a billion insects and killed us all. Thanks everyone for watching Splitsecond's second video. Once again, we welcome all feedback coming our way and ways you think we could improve our videos. Did you notice the background song? What did you think? What about the additional play insight? Join us again next week for a new set of commanders and more decisive plays. Until then,